So I think we can begin. I will stop sharing my screen and welcome you again all. I will give the floor to Danai Theodoridu, who is moderating this discussion today. I would like, on behalf of the National Theatre of Northern Greece, to welcome and thank Eve Chabanon, Lara Staal, and Rispoli for, I hope I pronounce your names rightly. And I'm giving the floor to Danai Theodoridu to start the conversation. Thank you so much.
Sorry, I speak without, sorry. So thank you, I was saying, thank you, Amalia. Thank you, Eve and Anna and Lara for being here. Thank you, everybody, for joining. It's a great pleasure to have the opportunity to exchange in this frame, and thank you, Amalia and the National Theatre of Northern Greece for providing the frame, because for me it's really rare to sit down with artists. I really appreciate, and I feel that I share some very important issues with and discuss. So I look forward to this. I have invited 3 international female artists. I think it matters also. Female and neutral, sorry, they, I know you use they. Eve, Anna, and Lara. And I invited them because for me, they work in a very interesting way and for a long time in a very interesting way with socially engaged art. And for time reasons and to avoid this initial awkward moment of introductions, instead of going through their very interesting CVs, I will put them in the chat so you can see what each one of the guests is doing, so that we can go immediately in the discussion. I put the short bios in the order that the speakers are going to later speak. So the topic of our discussion, as you probably know, that's why you're here, the title is Constructing Public Space and Time Through Performance. And we're going to talk about participation in performing arts, its potential, but also maybe its limitations. When can participation, under what conditions, can participation have an emancipatory quality? And when does it become something which is more problematic, like manipulative or exploiting or raising important ethical concerns that people who are interested in participation probably know? Starting point for our exchange today, this evening, it will be a proposal that I tried to articulate in my recent book publication. It came out last summer, almost a year now, which is called Publishing, Practicing Democracy Through Performance. And there, what I tried to argue is that today I believe that we need to move beyond speculative aesthetics, which is a term that Bourdieu used in the 90s to describe an artistic choice that is largely aesthetic. That's why the term relational aesthetics, pointing to an interaction with the audience. So the artist decides for a certain interaction, which is almost exclusively controlled by the artist. What it will be, when it will start, when it will finish, how it will go, etc. So to move from that beyond this term, but also beyond the social term, which is a more recent term. It was used in the 2006 by Claire Bishop, where she discusses participatory art. So we go from interaction to the audience as co-creator, and not only as an interaction that is controlled only by the artist, but the audience becomes a participant, a co-creator, which means that the work cannot be done. So the agency, it's much more significant. But today I argue that merely participation is not enough. We need to think about how this participation works and to focus on performance structures that construct public space and public time. And that's what I call publishing. These structures most of the times are participatory, but it's not necessary. Maybe there are other ways. But at the same time, though, not all participation constructs, according to me, public space and public time. It can also be a problematic participation, as I mentioned earlier. So what we're going to discuss is under what conditions when performance can become an act of publicing. And we will take the next hour or so, a bit longer maybe, to discuss what publicing means in practice. And the plan for the next 1 hour and 15 minutes is to go as follows. Each one of the three guests will have approximately 10 minutes to share some concrete examples and processes involved in their own projects, and maybe also have a small first response to the term publicing and how it may or not resonate with their work. We will also do that more later, I guess. Then I will try to summarize some main points in the input we will have. And we will go into a short discussions, exchange some questions among us, the four of us, and then we will open to the audience. But I would really like to ask you, while you listen either to the three presentations or our first exchange, to put in the chat any questions you might have or thoughts you want to share. It can be in English or in Greek, and I will translate. And then we will address them in our discussion, but also later in the open discussion we have with you. That's it for now from me, and I will give the floor to the three of you, and Lara will go first, and then even then Anna. So Lara, the floor is yours. We look forward.
I had understood Eve would go first, but it's fine.
Yes, no, you're right. Sorry, I confused. Yes, sorry, Eve. Yes, you can go first.
Okay, then I think it will be better if we can start with the video that I sent a bit before as an introduction.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yes, Amalia will do that.
Yeah.
Amalia, will you share the video yourself? This is not here. So if
here I'm
okay.
First of all, hoping the link to put it in the chat for anybody that.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And now I will share the video.
We put also the link there in case you have some technical problem and you cannot watch it easily. But it will also be shared here.
So it's. Hey, do you?
And how do you feel?
A little bit anxious.
Why is that?
I'm not sure I trust you.
You're not sure?
I trust you.
You're not sure you trust me? Why don't you trust me?
Your role.
Ah, my role. What do you perceive my role to be?
Mediator. I was called a mediator now.
I don't know about you, but
The video is stuck.
Seriously.
With Zoom.
I'm talking about the altitude. You know, there's a lesson in this, in bringing people together.
I think we can stop and reboot it a bit because.
And
Shall I
asking them
stop
to
it?
try and figure out.
Don't see anymore. Our screen is.
It's freezing.
Yeah, it's freezing.
Okay, I'm stopping sharing. I've put the video on the chat in the chat so everybody can see it on their own.
All right. I don't know when I should start.
No,
Everybody's okay. So yeah, that's it's feel a bit strange for me to talk again about this project because it's been quite a while. To give a short explanation, and then I will go back and start the long one. But to start, I would say that on the 15th June of 2017 at 7 p.m., around 40 people gathered in the council chamber at the town hall of Barking and Dagenham, a borough of Outer East London, for one evening. And this highly sabotaged site, usually closed to the public, was open and welcomed local and non-local residents, members of the Women's Institute, students from the local Eastbury Community School, artists and poets, and the local councillor. And the aim of the Antisocial Social Club was to create a fictional temporary coalition, that of the dispossessed, and show the fragility of the democratic apparatus through a performative debate. The evening was led by facilitator and performer artist Chloe Cooper, who invited the assembled guests to talk about themes that are particularly binaries and divisive, such as dependency on money, authority on others, and independence in finance and thoughts. Difference in the suspicion of difference. Do we identify with cultural and social others, or do we fear them? Social and economic inclusion and exclusion, states of emergency, and the gentrification of the city by art. So to go back a bit in past, I will define this project more like almost a student project for me, as like I've been invited to do this residency where everything starts just after the program named Open School East, which used to be in London, and in which I participated the year before. And through this program was like mainly about how to engage audience in like public program of education program in art. I met few people from organization named Create, who's producing, let's say, participative art in London. And at that time, they just opened a residency named the White House in Dagenham. And when I arrived, so it was open for like 6 months already. And it was pretty open. The goal or the aim of the residency was like I would have to live there for 6 months and met people around and try to organize something to involve the different people living in the area. And the first program was actually like a school, like a programming school for women and non-binary people. But really quickly, I attended to public debate in the city of Dagenham, led by Michael Sandel, who's a philosopher, author of Liberalism and the Limit of Justice. And the theme of this public debate, which was open to everyone in the city, was, would life be better if robots did all the work? Which was inspired by Buckingham Dagenham's industrial past. And I was quite impressed by the level of manipulation that was used during this public debate, and how many tricks was used in order to lead the public to think that they was like actually participating in a way that they was talking about themselves, but they was actually like pushed in few directions in a very actually like fun way, or like something playful. And yeah, so to just serve a discourse that have been pre-write and pre-think for them. And I thought that it would be interesting to go back on this idea of how to actually involve public and how to create something that was like showing the string of this manipulative system of taking a crowd and like make them think they can talk for themselves in politics. And it was a very special moment as we just passed through Brexit. It was really like a shock, and Barking Dagenham was in majority voting for Brexit. And there was like a lot of tension in there, especially with this new residency as well, which involved artists mainly from London. And Buckingham Dagenham was like really, the people there was really fearing the gentrification process that we know in London, and that's absolutely destroying everything. And this new residency was kind of like announcing really bad moments coming for the neighbors. So yes, we kind of need to talk, and that was the goal and the aim of that. So I started to meet a lot of people, organizing dinner, programming a lot of workshops, programming a lot of screening inside of the house, which was a residency. Met different associations and schools and just neighbors like hanging out around and like making this space really open space. And I took notes of what was like the main subject for them and what was like kind of burning at that moment. And after a while, I just started to write, meeting also with Chloe Cooper, who's a performer, and her work is really involved with public. And so we start to work on this piece and rehearsing a lot about like how to write a sketch. We can have like question, and all these questions with these other question. How do you feel like you can involve people, but actually like through the question, you already influence the way that people can answer and where we can go after that. And the topic of this debate that we start to write was dispossession, the feeling of dispossession. What is to be dispossessed? And it was really right as a fiction, mainly. So what happened is the day of the coalition, actually just before the coalition, something really terrible happened, which was like the London Bridge attack. And two of the people who was part of it was from Buckingham Dagenham, just where we was living. So a lot of tension emerged again, even more, I would say. Yeah, there was like a really few different form of aggressivity and violence in the street. And the town hall feared a lot this discussion, but also feel like it would maybe be a moment to try to like put down a bit of the pressure. So yeah, so the D-Day, let's say, people arrived. They was welcome with like a glass of what they want to drink, would be alcohol and non-alcoholic. So people so can kind of see each other before to enter until that we start. And so they enter this big room, which is supposedly to be made for people who take decision for the city, not for the public. So it's already like kind of a feeling to be here and be part of it. And each seat has like a kind of mic that you can use to express and be like streaming in the space. And so people was invited to open like this kind of like a golden envelope in which there was few text and badges. And it was explained at the beginning that the people who want to wear the badges were the people who will be okay with the fact that we use the image after in communication or like distribution. And the one who didn't want to wear them would be the one that don't want to be part of it as a physical thing. And we start the first question, which was, how do you feel? And of course, it's super difficult to answer because you don't feel like, you feel like everybody will see you. And that's very uncomfortable. So we say, okay, maybe it's too hard to start with that. Maybe we should start with other kind of exercise. And we set up like a lot of exercise. And the one that we hear at the end, for example, of the video is like actually like the warm-up, the voice warm-up, the moving warm-up, and all kind of like theater exercise that make people laugh first and like hear themselves in the space and feel more comfortable with the person sitting next to you, or like, and yeah, just make the feeling of to be part of something playful. Then the first real question, let's say, arrived, which was like, who in the room feel independent? Hands up. And then who is dependent? Hands up. And so on the script, it was right, like you should let this person or this type of person enter, and then this type of person answer to the second question, and then another one. And then supposedly the people who would say that they are dependent will give more argument in their explanation on which way they feel dependent, and would kind of convince the room. So question after question, the answers, let's say, will convince or not the room. And after a while, the question become more and more personal and more tricky to say. And then we use what we call the fiction click, which was, okay, zombie attack, they took the TT. We are locked here, but we are protected. So let's create a coalition. And this coalition, which is not to please you, but it just like has the most of the coalition are like a way to survive, even when we have to like team up with people that you don't really agree with. And through this coalition of zombies and theory and fiction, we reset up all society. After a while, this society had other people coming and like knocking at the door, which was like people kind of part of the game. And the first question then was like, should we let them in? Can we let them in? And the coalition have to take decision. And again, who is against, who is for these people to get in, and who will convince who? And yeah, step by step, after 1 hour and a half, that there was like a all new societies of choice and acceptance or rejection that was set up with like a lot of argumentation around that. And at the very end was like explaining a lot how all these conversations have been manipulative or not, and how this could be interesting or not to see who feel actually like they've been, let's say, part of their own decision, or who feels like they will totally influenced by the system or the others, and etc. etc. And I think I'm out of time, if I understand well, so I stop here.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you. Lara, you want to go?
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Eve. Thank you, Danae. Thank you to host this conversation. It was a huge pleasure to read parts of the book about publishing, and it was, yeah, I could relate to a lot of the terms and the strategies that you, Danae, are describing, and that we for sure will come back to. I think it's maybe rather than now directly responding to the 4 principles that Danae shares in the book around publishing, which we for sure will come back to, but it's locality, attention, speculation, and disruption. I think it's maybe nicer to just share 2 examples, also because of time, and then maybe afterwards we can see like in what, how do these terms relate to the projects I'm sharing here. So the first project I'd like to share is called Europe on Trial. It feels also some time ago, 2018. It was a project that I co-curated with Yunus Usman Noor. We worked already together for a couple of years before. Yunus was part of the We Are Here movement in the Netherlands, which was a refugee-led movement that was claiming and demanding visibility, which has to do with, and I'm trying to be, because there's a lot of specificity, but I will try to be brief in introducing this project, but it has to do with the regulations around asylum policy. And back then in the Netherlands, it was very common, and it still is, when people cannot go back, when they don't have papers, for example, their identity has not been, they're not identified because of language problems or because of lack of papers, or human rights organizations claim it's not safe to go back. People would be just sent back to the street, basically saying you're illegal because we don't give you papers, you need to disappear. So this act of we are here, we exist, we are your problem, take responsibility for our presence, was a very strong movement and grew and stirred a lot of debate and discussion in the Netherlands. Related to We Are Here, Here to Support was founded, which was a group of artists and activists who created support structures and a sort of artistic platform that was aiming to empower people without papers. And through art, but it really went for to all levels. So it was basically one day looking for warm coats in the winter, to we need beds or houses there, or we need to squat something because we don't have a roof for too many people, to more artistic projects that were, they created a printing house, they made an app, an application for newcomers arriving to help them finding their way, and also with theatrical or theater projects. And that's how I got involved. So we were working on a project earlier called Labyrinth with I was a dramaturg there. And that's how I got to know Eunice. We also were part of workshops, and we decided to continue together and to start a fictional trial. And this fictional trial was called Europe on Trial. It came from a necessity to claim the fact that Europe is guilty because of the many deaths in the Mediterranean Sea, and because at that point this case was not put at the International Criminal Court yet, and we felt this was needed, and we didn't felt the bureaucratic ways would be fast enough for us to put it on the agenda. So we thought, let's use theater to kind of pre-enact this trial. Maybe I'll add a little bit more of information, but first let's go to the video. Therefore, I will share my screen because it's not online. Yes. Now you see the video of Eve, of course, because that's what we were looking at before. Let me see if I can find it. Interestingly enough, I lost it again, but I can click it here. Yes, here it is. So I hope you everything works sound-wise, else please put it in the chat or say it out loud so we can see how to solve it. I won't play it entirely because it's too long, so I will stop at some point. It's correct, there's no sound yet, it will come.
This might look like a stage and it might look like theater, but it isn't. It might look like a performance, but it's really about addressing the real issues and the real challenges.
There is no lawyer that will defend Europe. The speakers will all temporarily step into the shoes of expert witnesses, defense lawyer, or prosecutor. But the most important role is reserved for you, the audience, the jury, but also the accused as citizens of Europe.
Today, I'm standing in front of you to accuse Europe of violations to human rights with regards to its asylum policies. I accuse the European Union of sending people back to places they've so desperately tried to flee, for being obsessed by statistics instead of ethics. Nobody chooses to be a refugee.
I would say that by asking the European Union to live up to its moral obligations, we should be very careful in a time of mass migration, in a time of disruption of many countries surrounding Europe, to safeguard the moral middle ground and not overstating, attributing guilt.
Are we willing to do as much as we possibly can? And the answer can only be yes or no, and it cannot be yes, but.
Say I call upon the indictment of Europe for colonialism. And before we think it's a thing of the past, let us remember of the ever-morphing neo-colonial practices of political control, occupation, economic exploitation, and the multinational corporations. Say I call upon the indictment of Europe for structural adjustment programs, constant growth, 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 growth. At what cost? At all costs.
Immigrants have become a political capital of sorts for political parties. It's politically more sound to keep a problem in place than to actually solve it.
I come by a boat. I never had a passport in my life. I lost the possibility to live a normal life because I'm just not good on telling my story.
Yes. I stop it here. So maybe just a little bit of context, but I will really keep it short. So we made a kind of moral trial. It's also a hearing. It's a combination of a trial and a hearing, where we invited all kinds of experts around migration. The three people that are leading the court are, one is still practicing as a judge, and the other two are more from academical background. And then there were members of We Are Here and Here to Support. One of them was Sinan, the last one you heard speaking, but there was also a mixture with artists. So Ogutu Muraya, for example, was speaking just before. So it was really kind of interdisciplinary mix. And then there were also respondents in the public where we tried, and I guess these are elements probably also for the discussion later, but we tried to have both in the experts and in the audience people from, let's say, more leftist perspectives and more right-wing perspectives. This was very complicated. We can speak about it. And the other thing, of course, is how to deal with people that were speaking there, not having any papers, being in a kind of fictional trial, because there wasn't, I mean, you're of course hoping to get impact and influence, but you cannot predict this. So how to take care of the fact what they're sharing and what they are expecting or projecting on the fiction, because they are so much longing for such an environment as a trial. And here, what we propose is a fictional one, even though everyone really embraced it fully as full reality. We all know it's not. So I guess these are interesting things to discuss further, and complex things. The other project, the time, it goes so quickly, isn't it? And I will really try to, 10 minutes. I will really try to be short. Maybe I should have chosen just one project, but I thought it was nice in a way, because this publishing term as proposal is so essential, and I can relate so much that it can be nice to see a very different project, but I'll really try to be brief. So recently, and we just stopped touring for the last 3 years, I worked with so-called dropout teenagers, so teenagers that were stuck in the secondary school system. And I invited them to make a performance where they're actually educating the audience, the adult audience, about what's wrong with the educational system in Belgium, in their opinion. Yes, is there anything else to say? I will just share my screen again and go to the pictures, and maybe while going through the pictures, I can share a little bit more about what was happening in this performance. Wait, I'll do it like this. And then I go to here. You see them already. So the performance was called Dissident. And there we made a performance in 12 lessons. So this is lesson 1. And we really developed lessons built on long conversations we had together, writing text, feedbacking in, letting them feedback the text I wrote for them and trying to kind of articulate their words. And they would write different proposals for different schools. So they're now sitting on a closet and it reads interaction school, or how to translate onthasting, something like slowing down school and horizontal school. I'll just go a bit quickly. Then in the middle part, there more sharing. So there's an interruption of the lessons that is quite frontal, and they go more sharing into, let's say, autobiographical material. They also enter into a party mode, and there's a moment where they invite the audience to participate in the party. Something that can be tricky, but I must say it worked super well, especially because the moment before they're quite angry. So they're also using the audience to kind of take advantage of the fact that they are in power and they are in the theater, and they can for once speak back and lecture others like they have been lectured and felt they have been silent for a very long time. But we also felt like this anger is of course also a bit unfair, and we keep the audience hostage in this position. So the party is also a moment to kind of canalize and let free of all these emotions, and also for the audience to kind of get rid of that negative energy, let's say. And then there's a break where they're also throwing candies and stuff from the machine that you saw before. Here it's empty, so you see they throw everything into the audience. So it becomes really also a different environment that is maybe more about being together with the audience. And then they continue going back into the school setting where they're sharing these lessons. There's a moment where the actors go into the audience, also speaking especially to the young people to get some more feeling of alliances. And what is important, I guess, that you don't see so much in the pictures is that there's a lot of documentary material that goes through the performance where we interviewed experts. This is a pedagogue, but also their parents speaking about them and their teachers speaking about them. So you get a kind of all-round perspective and also see how they've made it difficult for their parents and for teaching environments. So to also kind of get a kind of complex, rich, layered story around their realities. And they end with a letter to the Minister of Education in Belgium. And this is actually a moment where they share a video where you can see how they spent 10 hours in front of his office because they tried for 3 years to get in touch with Ben Wijts, the Minister of Education, but he never showed up. So there's also a moment where there's a video where they really interrupt him coming to a school and try to get his attention. So in that sense, there was, let's say, you could speak about how this performance created public space within the theater or tries to public the theater at that moment, but there was also interventions out in public space that were brought into the theater through videos. And here you see an after talk, which we always did, and it was also very important because there were often teachers and teenagers and parents in the public. So those conversations were sometimes very emotional and often very urgent. And here you see also a guest speaker. That was not always the case, but this was a kind of thing in Belgium where she was a poet of the city of Antwerp with a critical poem on education, but she got censored, this poem. So she resigned, and so we invited her to speak. I am surely over time, so I'll stop it here.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Anna, last but not least.
Hello. Hello, it's super interesting, in fact, to see how projects resonate with also the terms that you have proposed in your book. So thank you very much for organizing this occasion. I'm also very happy to see that there are many women in the audience, and it's also a special occasion. Yes, I chose one project that is not the most recent because I wanted to discuss ethical approach that we engage with the participants of a project and with the audience. And one of the decision that I took in a certain moment, that was 2015, was that I wanted to be sure that the participants that I would take part in, that I would co-create the project with, or that I would collaborate with, would have their own interest in the project. So to avoid any kind of patronizing attitude or victimization attitude or any kind of even a doubt of catastrophe tourism that would the audience would project into the project. So I decided that I needed to train to do project with very strong people, first of all, so to be sure that the relation would be fair. So I decided to work with the activists, and that's continuing, by the way. I'm trying to share a video, and I will see if I will manage. Okay, it's not yet sharing. Yes, it is. The project that I would like to talk about is Les Marches de la Bourse. So the step of the stock exchange is a project that that I decided to do because of a change in the city plan of the historical center of Brussels, in which one of the main axes that was car driven decided to be created as a redesigned as a pedestrian zone, which of course on the surface is one of the big requests of citizens and is made in the interest of a large group of citizens. But we know that the side effects of this kind of operation are much more tricky in terms of gentrification, in the sense that very often this kind of redesign of city centers aim at boosting tourism, and so and also they manage to let increase the price of real estate. So small shops, night shops, marginal shops, marginal situation, marginal association that were situated in these big acts had to leave, and had to leave the space for big chains. This is, of course, only one of the aspects that this kind of restructuring of the city, of the public space in the more basic term brings. I think that one of the specific and very local side effects that indeed happened was the depoliticization of the public space, in the sense that the stock exchange for Brussels has always been historically a natural stage for small demonstration, even of one person sometimes, or anyway for demonstration that were not belonging to big organization or big unions. That for a city like Brussels, with many, many different, not only languages, countries of origins, but also issues, groups it's extremely important to have a spontaneous stage for political protest. So what happened is that the stock exchange as a building would have been privatized, at least in its usage. It's still, the property is still public, but an association of brewers and beer shops basically managed to make of it a sort of a museum of beer, temple of beer, for beer experiences, so for purely commercial usage. And then would have taken control of the entrance. The entrance is where the steps and the stairs are located. Taking control of the entrance, meaning that no disturbance is allowed in that space. The idea was to hijack the possibility that the art system offers in order to obtain an authorization that a political demonstration wouldn't get. So we asked for art authorization to make a performance. And what we created was overlapping of all the demonstration that I could reach, all the demonstration that took place on the stock exchange from 1968 until 2015, and to overlap in a sort of a cacophonic archive of this demonstration happening in the same time. That's why I chose this project, because I think that was resonating very much for me, the publishing of time, how to make public time, not only public space. I asked the activists that were part of each demonstrations to come back with the original slogans, with the original companions, and with the original claims, and to see what happens to do it again. Of course, the win-win relationship was intended as giving a stage, or intending as offering a very visible occasion. What happened is that in the very clear way of designing the positions and the timing of each of the demonstrations. Of course, I lost totally control, and that was very nice. They took over. They decided to reschedule the things, and basically at the end, they created a sort of a mega multi-demonstration for the right to demonstrate. And another nice thing that happened is that few casual demonstrations that were happening in the nearby, maybe a few hundred meters away, got confused, and they thought this was the occasion they had to join. So we had a mix of participants and non-participants that became participants. I'm going to show you a few minutes of it.
So do we also have sound, Anna? I don't hear. Do you hear the video?
No, I also don't hear anything.
Yes.
Anna? Maybe she muted herself or something?
I don't know. Anna, can you hear us? Doesn't seem to. Yeah, something happened with the video and.
Okay.
We don't hear you. We didn't listen to the sound of the video. I don't know if we were supposed to.
Yes, you were supposed to listen to the sound of the video.
The sound was not audible, yeah. I don't know why.
But I think it's, if Amalia can put it in the chat, you can also have a check after.
I have already done so.
So it's only a few minutes, so you can also, but basically the idea is that each of the demonstration were overlapping, and the sound, of course, they were creating a huge cacophony. What happened is that the situation that was, art festival situation became as a real meta demonstration. So one of the, at the end of the video, there is a sort of an assembly that takes place on the stairs, in which we try to understand if we need to go and occupy the festival center, because the Ministry of Culture was there. And the end, the decision was not, because it was too much belonging only of one of the subject of the meta demonstration. But it was, voilà. So, yeah, I think this, for me, it's a trigger to discuss a few of the terms that you proposed, and to reflect especially on this ethical approach that I'm trying to establish with the participants of the project since then. Now I'm working here in Bologna with groups of very young activists. They are teenagers and they occupy the school. So we reflect on how they can, in fact, re-inject hope in cynical activists that are 40 years plus. So in a way, there is this mutual learning school going on. This Sunday, there will be a public presentation in which the mayor of the city is invited, and they, starting from the agency of the young activists, we are trying to rediscuss the legitimacy of breaking the norm. So to the importance for a city, especially for a city as Bologna, to let space to non-normative spaces, so spaces that do not have a convention, that are squatted and that are illegal, and how this illegality is absolutely necessary, how conflict is necessary for a healthy city, for a healthy public space. Maybe I give you back the word.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you. Great, really great. And the connections are so strong that I'm like, how can it be? Could it be that I knew for some, I mean, it's amazing how some things, yeah. That's why we should speak more. Thank you very much, all three of you. Before I was trying to note some things that for me are very interesting to maybe discuss further. Just a reminder for the people who listen to us that you can put your questions in the chat if you have any questions or thoughts you want to share. And then maybe I will try to sum up a bit and then maybe hear you. There's no the order. I will share my thoughts. It's not, I mean, it's random. But I have noted that there is, in terms of strategies, how have we attempted to to create public space and public time? I see a combined strategy of hacking existing spaces of institutional democracy. That's one thing, or existing protocols. And Lara talked about the court, like taking the protocol, working with the performativity of the court. I now in my new show work with the performativity of the assembly of the city hall. And also I enter the city hall. Eve also enters the city hall. So we hijack spaces of institutional democracy and we suggest something alternative there, or we take the protocols, specific institutional protocols, and we suggest something else there, or we hijack the public space and certain processes there, which are, it's not institutional democracy, is what Castoriadis calls instituting. So the public itself, how we try to, we're not institutions, but we are the ones who make democracy. So activism or demonstrations, trying to work with this part, which is not the institution, it's the one that defines or should define the institution. So we take existing frames or spaces of public sphere and we add a speculative layer on them. So rework in a way suggesting alternative ways of looking at them. And that's for me very interesting to discuss further. Then another thing that for me is very interesting is that, of course, as artists, at some point, Ivana Miller had told me that, you know, we have to accept that we are colonizers, that as artists, we colonize. We always colonize because we create certain frames. And I was thinking that what we do in our work, in all cases, we score things or script things. So we create a very specific frame, which is the frame we impose, let's say. And I don't think there's any other way. I have no problem with that. That's the artistic suggestion, let's say. But then, since you do that, how can you create a score that does not manipulate, that does not patronize or victimize, as Anna said, or does not push to certain directions or push to rethink on behalf of some people or manipulate, as Eve said? So how can we work with scores that are, give space for people to speak? Another one, there is an interesting limit for me, and I wonder where is the border between giving people the space, the public space, to speak back, as Lara said, so to emancipate through that, both with the teenagers and with the refugees, and I guess we more or less are interested in that, all of us, versus the ethical obligation we have to not ask people to expose too much or risk or even danger in the case of court, because some people would have to share. So how do we protect and not ask people to expose themselves, you know, in a way that it can be for them damaging, while also speaking back? So emancipating, where is this limit? How much do we push or how we work with that? Another thing that for me is also always very interesting is inclusion and exclusion. How do we reach to some communities, how these communities are exclusive? For me, it's a big problem. It's a point of criticism for what I do. And I was very interested to see Eve's assembly, which seemed very diverse, and it was great. So how can you reach, how do you work with being inclusive or with not being exclusive? And another one, which is for me also very interesting thing to discuss, is gentrification. Eve also referred to that a lot. How do you go, especially in existing communities, how do you approach them? For example, recently I was invited to work in a cultural center in Holland, and I was time and again introduced as the artist. The artist came, so now it's the artist. You know, so you go as a kind of a hipster. You know, it's I don't know how to. Maybe you know what I mean. How can you approach a community from an equal? I don't know. Does it make sense what I try to say? How you don't become part of the problem of gentrification, or coming from an institution or of a festival or an educational institution of arts. These are the 5 points I have. And just to be, I don't want to share now from time reasons, and I'm very interested in the discussion. My work, I don't want to talk about what I have been doing the last years, but I will share a link of Languages of the Unheard, which is on the language of protest. So for me, it was very interesting to hear about Anna's work, but in another way, we worked online again from the 50s to 2020 with protest signs and their performativity. And I don't know if Amalia, because now if I look for it, I will have to interrupt. If you can put the link of the new work of One Threesome, which will perform also in Thessaloniki next week, because there it's about the assembly. It reminded me, I think it shares common concerns with Eve's assembly, maybe also with Lara's. So that you can check there how I try to public things. But I would be interesting to hear your, any reactions you have or questions for each other, and response to publishing or to these points that I shared. Yeah, we don't have order, so Anna, you want to go?
Maybe I just one thing, just a quick reaction on how do we try not to become agent of gentrification, we as artists, which is one of the reasons why for a few years I tried not to do any project in the public space, in the physical public space, because I thought I really need to work to understand how not to become agent of gentrification and how not to become tool of maybe not, well, that's not the first goal, gentrification program, but they would not call themselves as such, but how not to become a sort of a side effect that is already planned in the picture. I think that first of all, it's important to be extremely transparent with oneself and with the people involved, being them, well, director, co-creator, participants, collaborators, or audience, about the danger of a project like that. And then, for at least that's my strategy, is to deconstruct a couple of very rhetoric words, like inclusion. This is very rhetoric and complicated word that probably hides much more than what it shows. Not to keep it too long, but just the right of not being included. I think it's extremely important to respect the right of not being included and not being included in a project that is of assimilation. And then of being transparent in terms of the power structures that underline the usually public programs, especially those residency and those creations that are meant to include part of participation that are not included yet. I would be very suspicious, but that's my tendency.
Yeah, true. Now it reminds me the new show is a performative assembly, so it's a scripted assembly where people are coming, they have a script and they follow it. And at some point in the rehearsals, while we were making the script, I mean, the tactic we have there is that we try to undermine, it's part of the script, the undermining of our power. We address it, that some people here know, we undermine it. And then at some point, one of the performers, we didn't put it in, but she said it as a half joke. She said at some point, because there are discussions in the assembly, and at some point she said, is it okay if I turn to another participant of the assembly and ask, excuse me, are you being paid? Because I am. And I'm like, she's right. I mean, there is something there that, but I guess, I mean, for me also being transparent is how else can you address that? I don't know. How can this, and then we overturn, of course, the power also. They give their power to participants. I will not give away more because it's still on next week in Greece. But it is, yeah. Transparency, and maybe also apart from transparency, find ways to give the power, like to change roles, I don't know, to somehow, and you go in another position, maybe.
Yeah.
I think,
yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. That's really interesting to hear you all reflecting on, like, I think for a while, I was always doing this exercise was when I was invited to work in somewhere with like a group of people, because it became more and more like this. And this is also I kind of like, not stop, but kind of like exit the art in terms of public engage art. But yeah, the exercise was like asking the question with everyone. So the first participant, artist, which will be me, and the institutions, like the power structure was like inviting. And the question would be like, where is the risk? Like, what's the risk? And who is taking it? And then will be like a really, really long conversation that will actually be lead during the whole project, and like re-ask again and again and again. And I guess like on some projects, it's been like the project by itself will be like always a rebooting of the same situation, trying to like avoid what like, or like to navigate between like this question of risk and where it can lead us. And yeah, I don't think I resolve anything about that in terms of gentrification either. I guess also like I come from suburb of Paris, from like my parents were like primary school teachers, white background, French background, and very like we grew up in schools, like so surrounded by students and people, and like I guess what felt strange for me, it was more like when I arrived in capital, like when I arrived to the centers, kind of. That was like a really strange feeling, and like bring a lot of interrogation about what do you bring back, kind of. And I keep asking myself and keep feeling kind of like in between different spaces. I don't know if I'm clear. It's big vague, but
yeah.
I'm not sure if you totally understood. You're saying when you come back to the capital, you mean when you come back to Paris, what do I bring, or am I?
I'm not from Paris. I'm from suburb of Paris, which is like a very different type of.
That's what you mean.
Background, like yeah,
within Paris, you mean center and the suburb.
Yeah.
So what is your responsibility actually towards? No, the place you come. Do you understand correctly?
Yeah, like what's. I mean, like it's. I had access to like spaces and like spaces that I will never think I will be able to, and then there is like a responsibility when you get there, and then what do you take back home, kind of. And I remember being like this person sitting and seeing artists and seeing like different art center around, trying to like do stuff with people, engaging with people. I was part of them, kind of. And I remember the frustration of it, and I remember the excitement of it, and I remember the kind of like space that it was creating inside of reality. And I guess this kind of like open this little world in our stuff.
So, I don't know. Lara, you wanted to say something before?
No, many things have been said that are interesting. I was just contemplating a bit what you said about the quote of Ivana Müller about we're all colonizers, and I get it, of course, because we're all using forms of power, and therefore I can totally relate what's being said here about responsibility, about transparency. I also can relate to what you describe, Danae, about being the artist, and you become some sort of this strange, exotic figure that, you know, is going to do something strange or out of the ordinary, or whereas actually you try to kind of meet the other more from what is shared than what is different or something. But I wonder if there's not also a little bit of an answer, like for me, for example, Europe on Trial was very important that Eunice and I did it together. So of course, then we're being in power together, but we have a very different, and at that time, he got his paper. So that also made a difference. I can relate a bit about what Anna said about I only want to work with strong people, which I find I'm not sure I would say, I'm not sure I would take the same position, but I understand this fear of victimizing others, confirming, you know, because we tend to say I'm working with people that need to be heard more or that need a voice. And it's always very difficult, this tricky thing of like, what does that make me, this weird savior? And I don't want to be that. On the same time, we should also acknowledge that there are power differences and some people are much more heard. And I do think and believe that theater and art is a place where we can redistribute power, or we can, what's the word? We can repair some of the damages or of the silencing that happened. But then how can you, from which position do you do that? And how can you shift power positions also towards yourself? And I think indeed transparency, so with the teenagers, for example, it was very important to constantly speak together about my position, their position, the audience position, and how people's gaze on them would fantasize or project all kinds of things, and how we could play with that so that they became the masters of that gaze in a way. And that was a very tricky process because they were never on stage before. They didn't have any theater experience, but they were troublemakers. So what I really learned from them is that they were not afraid of the audience. They just they had very little fear, which made them fantastic improvisers, which was very scary for me because I couldn't totally control. They were really loose cannons on stage, and things would happen also that were totally off script, and timings would, like, this break would last forever. They would start to fight with someone who got angry in the audience or something. So that was really tricky, but then it was like, yeah, but that's what I wanted, right? If there's really a reverse of power roles, then I'm not in control anymore, and that's what it is, and we all need to deal with that in a way.
Yeah, it's interesting that says that if you have to take the risk that if you don't take the risk that the thing can be destroyed, then it's not real hospitality. That's what Derrida says. So maybe,
this question that Eve asks about what is the risk and who is taking it is, I think, it's a very useful and strong one. Also towards ourselves, because I think sometimes as an artist, you are using your privilege actually to protect. So it's you that should get how could you say, like, any pushbacks or something should be on you first. That's why you're there, some sort of shell. And on the same time, it's not about keeping people small by constantly, so it's also about really then also being able to disappear. So for example, with the teenagers, I would not moderate the conversation. They would, I was not visible. No adult was visible from the beginning to it. They were just in control of the entire process from the beginning until the end.
Yeah, it's nice what you said of how to try to share more the similarity than the difference. I think it's also a nice key that I get from this conversation. And it is probably also brings to a key of yeah, of course, we work with different empowered people with of different level of empowerment, let's say, but probably a tool or a trick would be then to relate to them towards what they're really strong in, and then from these trends establish a relationship in which indeed they have enough space to take control. They have enough space also to let grow desire. That's for me very, very important, that they need to have, especially for, in this sense, I want to work with strong people. So I want to work with people that have a desire in being in that situation. I have a desire because probably they have an interest of one kind or the other. Then can be an interest of repairing a trauma, but it can then be a political interest. That can be just a visibility interest. But in a way, my interest is not the only one. It needs to be in an ecosystem of interest. And in that sense, a negotiation is possible. Negotiation of that can also be a little bit conflictual, indeed. Yeah, that's, I think it's very important for projects like those we do to allow negotiation, to allow mutual parallel goals. Some of these are totally invisible. They're not. Multiplicity, maybe it's also a good word.
Another word we need to deconstruct.
Yes.
Inclusion. We have to ban some terms maybe in this in the socially engaged art, or indeed rediscuss them. Great, yeah, for me it's really inspiring. I'm having all these notes. I'm thinking, what could I write? What could I do with them? It's really important to somehow, for me at least, systematize, bring things together, and it helps me to continue. People who listen to us, we can continue, but is there any question? I don't see questions in the chat. I don't know if it's because we go on. Should we give some time to the audience to... It's not necessary, of course, you don't have to, but I wonder whether I should give the time or... So are there any questions? I will give some time. You can raise your virtual hand if you want, or write in the chat.
Yeah.
Or open your microphone and speak.
Yeah, also if it's not a question, but something that resonates in also your own practices, maybe there are also other.
Yeah. Maybe while we wait, maybe it's more interesting for them to listen to us. I don't know. Is it? I mean, we can take 10-15 more minutes.
There is a question. There is a question in the chat.
Yes, I see it.
Yeah, that's always.
Yeah. So the question is if Europe was found guilty. So yes, Europe was found guilty, and that's also maybe the weaker part of the project when I look back at it.
Yeah, because it was expected, no?
It was, yeah, of course it was expected, because of course you're always more with like-minded. I mean, you're always, I think the organization, the audience reflects the organization. So we were rooted in an activist environment. We were part of this European Forum on Culture. We were in the Bali, which was the building. It's like a debate center, but now it's the building of it's also the building of the former court of Amsterdam. So yeah, that was of course not a representation of society. And so that part was a bit weak in the sense that it felt very much something we could predict. And I think we were also we're very much struggling with how much participation, in what way is this a hearing? So we called it a moral trial, and the idea was really like, where do we stand if it comes, like, we're writing history now, history is already being written, we have so many deaths on our name. Is this like a deliberate genocide on anyone who tries to cross the sea? Or what is our moral, I mean, what's happening here? And what are our thoughts as citizens on how we want to welcome or protect people that are feeling. So that was very much the question. But I think and one of the difficult things was also that it took 3 hours and people would leave before, which was very painful because there were people, again, without papers for sometimes 12 years that were sharing. And I mean, time is such a weird thing in their lives because they're on hold for years and years and years. And then there's this audience that is going to this evening with all kinds of projects and they're like, oh, well, 3 hours, you know, I also need to have my pizza or get this performance that I want to see after. And so there was also very much a clash of different realities. Olivia Ruta-Zippa was one of the lawyers, the one who spoke in the beginning, or the judge. She said it was good it was taking so long because it can only be painful and it can only cause friction. If it would have been, you know, 90 minutes, it would have been not in relation to the complexity of it. But I think these are all kind of things that are that stay a bit unresolved, let's say.
And the court normally would take months, so
years. I mean, if you look at the International Criminal Court, the case is still not, I mean, it's still being prepared.
But can I ask maybe something strategic, because I know that we have some artists around us who might be interesting. How do you reach out to people? For example, I also had a question, Lara, because it seemed that the teenagers you worked with were already a group, or maybe I missed it, so they knew each other? No, they didn't. So how did you reach out to them? Because you said that they were trying to meet the Ministry of Education for a long time, so that's why I thought they were a group already. But yeah.
I, of course, can respond. I just feel also responsible to my co-speakers, and I would love also to hear more from Eve, for example, because I felt that was a very interesting project, but I don't know if I got all the layers of it. And also speaking about the center of Paris versus the suburbs, like what made you decide to work in a certain area for how long, what kind of, if you say, what do I take back? Is there some form of aftercare? And of course, I'm also very happy to respond to the teenagers, but maybe it's nice to hear Anna or Eve.
Yeah, I would like how to bring people in. I guess the main part of my work used to be to do research, field research. Will be like, that's why I say like in Dagenham, basically this place and the demography of the city and this special area was really similar from where I grew up. So it kind of felt like a strange mirror in another language, so in another type of culture and stuff like this. But like when I said that I organized a lot of events, which were like not art events, but like simply like dinners or like screenings of film. We did, for example, a whole retrospective of Ken Loach movie, which was not like, I'm not passionate about Ken Loach, but it was just like a way to like bring people in and get interested, because like, yeah, and bring the subject in of conversation. And then, for example, like for all the picture or like the video of the performance, I worked for like a few weeks on a school for adults who want to like go back to school, and especially for women. And yeah, to say like, I'm not going to like ask to friends or like artists that I know that are doing this job properly, but like try to like engage workshop about how do we film or like document this type of event. And again, with like few charities or like, yeah, and like I'm thinking about another project in Paris with people in exile. I guess like the preparation of what we done took like 2 years of meeting lawyers, meeting association, charities again, activists again, people who are like just like I don't know, evolving around all these kind of like circles, and let them meet again and like try to understand where is my position inside of that, and what can I bring and what can I take, and what kind of like surplus we can create, and what kind of exchange can be possible, kind of. And we don't start before we make sure that we all agree about what this exchange is. And we never do, actually. Really understood each other. which is maybe why it's so interesting still. But yeah, what I was reflecting about suburban center of cities is like when I grown up, I grown up in suburb where I felt like nothing, like we was like kind of like a part of what was put on side, kind of what was like interesting or what was like important. We was like, I don't know, it was like not even like a thing to like study art, for example, for where I am. And art was also like something like almost pretentious, maybe. And yeah, like it was not a life, kind of. So I also bring that with me when I walk, and I bring back what I find when I go back home. That's what I wanted to say before. And yeah, I'm not sure about if I answer properly about the question. But also, to be honest, I come back a lot about this economic question about how do we produce this type of work? Who is producing this type of work? Where is the money from? Who's paid? And how are they paid? And what type of life does it bring? And inside of the structure of power, for example, at some point in very long-term research and projects, I can say that it creates a form of precarity if you don't have the, let's say, economic background to keep going this type of research properly or project, and then this precarity kind of like get down the project by itself. And it's like also like when you work as like a mission, like it become a mission, and this feeling and this type of attitude is very problematic in different way. And I'm still very questioning this, and that's why maybe I also like kind of stop this type of practice for a while, because I didn't find a good resolution for now for what I concern. Yeah.
I also have a question. I don't know if it's because for all of us, I mean, do you think that socially engaged art is a good definition of what we do? Because I have I don't know, I'm not sure. I think that it brings certain kind of expectations in the audience, maybe, that somehow is a sometimes is a pervert effect of neutralizing the impact of what we do. Yeah, but it's socially engaged art, so it's going to be this. And then, so I was asking if there is, if we should, like, as we are with names now, if we should agree on a different definition that
Yeah, I'm thinking now. I haven't thought. I mean, in general, I don't like it. Sometimes I use it, but I don't use it really. I mean, rarely I use it. And when I use it probably more critically. But I'm thinking now, like quickly, that that's why I suggested publishing, because socially engaged art presupposes that society lacks something and we do engage, whereas it's not so much to participate or engage. So it's more, what does the work do? Yeah, I find publishing for me in my head a more equal term, a term that has more, I don't know, horizontality, or yeah, it's not about engaging, it's about social engaging society that is otherwise not engaged. It's about doing something else with performance.
Yeah, what I like a lot about this idea of publishing is that it resonates a lot with what I'm trying to do, I think, is that it emphasizes the idea that public space is a conglomeration of differences and of friction and of discussions or inequality or power relations that needs to be negotiated all the time. And so public, like performance that publicizes, how can we say this in the pub, that makes things public. Yeah. Gives room for those things that, because of consumerism, because of capitalism, because of all these things that Anna also very beautifully and clearly described in this La Bourse project. There's a real need to re-establish spaces where we as citizens, from our position of citizens, of political beings, can meet difference to discuss values, morality. So I think the idea that art can be a place that makes space for that without indeed already putting some sort of labels or identities of like, I'm socially engaged and because I care, you know, that's already this idea of saving others, or these inequalities in a way that are kind of amplified with this socially engaged term, I think. Although I do use it, it's okay. I remember that we got like a very bad reviews for the dissident project. Well, funny enough, from art critics, from theater critics in Belgium, and we got very good responses from the audience and from also people in the field. But on a review level, it was really badly received, and because somewhat like the critic was the neighbor of one of the performers, and he went to her saying like, but why and stuff, and she was like, yeah, well, if it was Victoria Deluxe, which is known as this kind of social art place or socially engaged art, I would have judged it differently. And I felt that was such a disappointment in a way, that there are these kind of categories of high art and low art still very much present. But on the same time, I felt like, and that's why it's great. I'm a house that artist connected to a place like Ente Ghent, which is actually associated performer with, let's say, more conservative, even repertoire, because that makes it in a way. So I can totally relate to what Anna said about neutralizing. That, yeah, how can you make sure you're not being neutralized? It's good if you have a big, powerful house behind you, because in a way it makes it unclear what this practice is doing there.
But maybe I have a question also regarding this. Anna, you say on the biography that you're working on the border between artistic creation and activism. And maybe, I don't know, what draw the line? What makes something being more artistic, or the other one more like on the activist side? How do you navigate that?
But for sure, the context. So when I'm invited in an artistic context, I consider it more artistic approach, even if then the reasons are maybe activism. And then activism is also definitely something that is much more continuous, that is less project-based. I don't know. I've been part of this Common Wallet project that is a shared economy mini network of 10 artists sharing all what they earn. So one bank account, everything we earn goes theirs, and everybody picks up what they want, without control, as a sort of a decolonization from the sense of anxiety that money provides, and the sense of projection of precarity that the artist's work brings together. And this is for me activism. It's mini activism, of course, but it's definitely something that infuses your practice in a very, very continuous way. But I don't know if there is really, it's a very good question. I don't know if there is really a clear border between the two, or indeed if most of the works that we do are trying to blur these borders as a sort of, I have to say that one other word that we haven't talked very much about, but is very crucial and is one elephant in the room, is authorship. In the sense that most of the project we do, in a way, use the capital of authorship that we have been built during years, just because maybe we worked since a long time, not because we're a genius, but this becomes a capital that you put at disposal of a project. But at the same, of course, it's also a trap, because expectation of authorships are there. And at least in my case, I realize more and more that if you take it as consistent, this practice of trying to co-create or trying to revert the balance of priorities. So the priority is not to make an amazing work, maybe, but the priority is to have small seeds that are implanted and that can continue without you. Some little grains of change here and there that, of course, you don't have necessary control of, but something that has a little bit of an impact. These sometimes is in contradiction with authorship. So it's not that you do what exactly you would think it's the most amazing thing in the world, but maybe it's more efficient. More efficient also in terms of collective growth of the team, of the group, of the participating people. So for next conversation, I really would love to talk about authorship with you, because I think you have very inspiring thoughts.
I think that at least in my head, because it is important, that's what I wanted to bring in with the colonial, that it's about, and with what saying that we create frames, we colonize, we create scores for, and how can we not manipulate there? But I think now you talk more about this capital of authorship, and not the fact that in a project you are the author, so you put the frame, and people have to, right?
It's probably related, no? I think in case of And Again, for example, I really wanted Lara Staal in collaboration with the names of the teenagers. And then they did it because I asked it, but then when they can, they're trying to kind of blow up my name in a bigger, So it's because they feel that they need to invest in me and make me into a name so that the audience can find me, and all these logics that we're dealing with in theater world. But I think it's very important to amplify that because we're working with so personal material, it can only be a collective artwork, which doesn't mean that you cannot differentiate, because I do think it's also very important to acknowledge power structures. There is a difference, even though I said, like, I want the teenagers always around the table, also for feedback sessions, whatever. They hear everything that I hear, and we make decisions together. Of course, I'm talked to differently, I'm addressed to differently. It starts with me. If And Again has a question, they will first, so there is imbalance of power. And I think for me, there's also a part of the answer lies in really acknowledging that and making it transparent, so that if I don't use my power well, they can address it, or other people can address it. And instead of trying to be as horizontal as possible, but in a way we always know that hidden structures then take over. But for sure, the credits thing is something I'm also trying to kind of figure out with every project again, and to be as creative as possible, and to discuss, and to make this also part, I don't know who of you said this, but that things are being discussed also amongst everyone as a team.
And I was just about to wrap up. But you're already answering that. Yeah. Okay. Yes. I guess. I mean, the impact is another word that we should abolish for sure. But of course, I mean, not the impact from the part of the funding bodies, but impact in the way we would like to see it. But that would be for me indeed another discussion, a very big discussion. What is impact? We could have. So thank you, Malia. But in the next maybe a webinar. Thank you very much. I think it's time to slowly,
Thank you so much. It was indeed enlightening.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Three.
Thank you for creating the occasion.
Thanks a lot. Thanks. Have a nice evening, everybody.
A lot of thanks.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Okay, so I guess we also